Got my coffee and today's guests here with me, so we're ready to roll. Welcome to our circular coffee break, where we will be casually talking about everything circular and beyond. And as always, we hope the podcast is interesting, insightful, and provides new perspectives for you. But if you have feedback, questions, improvement ideas, please leave a comment on your favorite podcasting platform or drop us a note at circularcoffeebreak@gmail.com. Today, I'm really excited to have two guests with me for the episode. In previous episodes, we talked a lot about regulation, how difficult it is to understand, how complex it is. So today, we will open up some of these things and talk about them in more detail. So here with me today is Linda Tissen, Country Lead EcobioManager DACH at Ecobio, and Katrine Hoset, Senior Consultant at Ecobio. For those of you not familiar, Ecobio is actually a Finland-born company providing consulting services in a broad area of corporate sustainability, as well as the EcobioManager, an advanced SaaS solution for managing corporate sustainability. And we will hopefully hear more about that in a moment. Katrine started off her career in research. After receiving a PhD in population and behavioral ecology from the University of Oslo, she worked as a postdoc researcher at the University of Turku and Nord University in Norway. In 2019, she joined Ecobio, where she works as a consultant in sustainability and a content specialist for the before-mentioned EcobioManager. Linda has a background in sales, marketing, and account management from organizations in Germany, Finland, and Russia. And since 2022, she's leading Ecobio's market presence in the DACH region, so Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, with a specific focus on the EcobioManager, enabling companies to achieve sustainability goals through innovative software implementation. Welcome to the show, Linda and Katrine.
Thank you, Michael.
Great. Linda, maybe to get us started, can you tell us a little bit about Ecobio and the EcobioManager? Why did you feel the need to develop a SaaS solution for managing corporate sustainability?
Yeah, gladly. So maybe we start as who we are. You already said we are a Finnish-born consultancy, and we started to work as a sustainability consultancy actually directly from scratch. So in 1989, which means we started at a time where there wasn't much about sustainability yet. And through those years, we kind of we were there at the beginning, like how sustainability developed. And we also had to learn a lot in those processes. So we cover today basically everything that you can think of, from life cycle assessments, GHG emissions calculations, strategic sustainability, and then now very much in demand environmental impact assessments. And then on the other hand, obviously, we also help companies with strategic sustainability, road mapping. Where do I want to be? How do I get there? And with that, obviously, we realized very early on that without digitalization, there is no way forward. And that is how we then developed the EcobioManager, which again, similar to, let's say, our value of continuously growing and changing and innovating, that's how the EcobioManager also developed. So we started with chemical management to support companies, added then regulations tracking, a risk assessment, and then also the reporting section, which started with the EU taxonomy reporting to support companies there. And now further on also to do the materiality assessment, the climate risk assessment, and step by step also adding everything else that will come or is going to come that maybe we don't even know about yet. So what has been always important for us is this notion of we need to develop continuously. There is no solution that is now ready for something in 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in the warm up to today's episode, we talked about the complexities and the difficulties for companies to really understand what it is. Now, Katrine, a lot has happened with regards to regulation for circularity and more broadly sustainability, as Linda just pointed out. We've seen the EU put in place a lot of new regulatory frameworks, and with more to come. There's a lot still in discussion. Other countries and regions are on a similar path, and it is very difficult to really understand what's going on, keep track of that, and to understand also what does it mean for my company if I'm a small or medium-sized enterprise, if I'm a large enterprise, and to basically put that into the broader operating environment and the broader operating landscape. Now, you've been working in this space for some time. How do you see the regulatory landscape today? And also, where do you see the future developments? Where are we going with all of this?
Yeah, so a big challenge with the regulatory landscape today is that it covers so many topics. There's so, as you said, the EU Commission has put forward a lot of new legislation, revisions of existing legislation and so forth. And it seems now currently that the Commission is also rushing through kind of a lot of these developments. So there's kind of a quite broad set of action plans developing legislation, as I said, that the Commission is working on. And most of this is defined under the European Green Deal, of course, which has been in effect for quite many years. But yeah, there's topics on renewable energy, circular economy, the EU emissions trading systems, sustainable finance, of course, chemicals, waste, food production, and of course, kind of what is close to our hearts currently, sustainability reporting. And I think also what is very interesting to see, very recent developments, is kind of a focus more on how also consumers can participate in the green transition and how kind of legislation is being built to better enable consumers to participate through green claims legislation and so forth.
Very, very interesting. And I feel that in the past, it was very often that regulation followed the market. So the market would do something and then the regulatory process would start and regulate the market. Nowadays, it feels EU, but also other geographies, regions, governments are actually on the forefront of that. They're actually setting the market in many areas. And I mean, you talked about the very different things like chemistry, like energy, but there's biodiversity, there's fresh water, there's all of these topics coming up and popping up. How do you see that development going forward and the need for companies to adjust to a very different regulatory process? And how are you, I mean, you're also working on the content for the EcobioManager, how are you taking that into consideration, this ever-changing landscape, which I would assume is not easy if you want to keep the SaaS solution up to date and always on top of the latest regulation?
Yeah, so I would say kind of what is very important is the how to put this. Well, we need to provide digital tools that's developed with the regulations, and also what is important is to focus on the very core decisions that companies need to make in this process. So what we are focusing a lot on is helping the companies to process all this information and providing tools that will make it easy for them to follow the necessary requirements, whether that is legislation compliance by itself, or if it's kind of tools for helping companies address biodiversity issues, climate issues, or the EU taxonomy, of course. So what what at least it seems like the EU is trying to achieve is some kind of harmonization of basically all kind of concepts and the language that is needed for performing within sustainability, so that all participants can talk with each other. Whether that can translate into more global harmonization, that is maybe a more open question. There are so many different forces, kind of opposing forces that plays into this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually always an economic, a business question that's looming somewhere in the background when you talk about regulation. And I mean, I had the chance to look a little bit into the EcobioManager. And as you said, Katrine, I think one of the key things is to help companies to structure this very complex animal of regulation and to understand what is it actually that we need to do and prioritize the right things so that you can get started in a way that it actually makes sense and you're not all over the place with all of these different legislative texts, and which are in itself not always easy to understand, but then also to follow those is not really easy. Now, I understand you recently had a webinar that had a very interesting title, EU Taxonomy, Everything You Need to Know About the Latest Changes and How to Plan for the Future. Now, if you would need to condense some of the key points, you already mentioned some of the focus of the EU. Mm-hmm. But if you would look at what is the EU taxonomy trying to achieve, and other similar initiatives in other geographies, where do you see the main areas for companies to focus on? What are the things to get started with in that context?
Yeah, so of course, kind of the main aim of the EU taxonomy from the Commission's point of view, of course, is that they want to increase the investments that are going into sustainable products and services. And an important step in this process is, of course, to create a common language. I mentioned this earlier as well, and a common set of definitions on what is a sustainable product and what is a sustainable service. As this common language also develops, it will provide a basis for other aspects of corporate sustainability, so kind of making it easier to report transparently on sustainability issues, and also developing better procedures for companies for sustainability claims of products and services as well. And I think it's so with the corporate sustainability reporting directive now being in force and applying from next year, there's a lot of new companies that will need to provide sustainability reports, and these companies haven't done that earlier. It's important for kind of companies, I think, to determine what type of reporting and data collection procedures that they will need to have in place for this to work properly. It's important also that they incorporate these a new sustainability thinking into the business strategy in the first place. Data collection, it's important across a range of these existing and new legislations as well. EU taxonomy as well as kind of the green claims directive that is underway, so it's really important to start thinking of how these changes will impact companies, both in the short term and longer term time frames.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think 2 points you're making are extremely important. I think one is to put it into the broader strategy, broader business context. I recently had a discussion about the double materiality analysis, and that for many companies, it's basically just a pure compliance and reporting system and not the strategic tool that it can actually be on a much broader level. So, and I think the other one, and also that we talked about before we hit record, is you need to get started now. It's not something you can push forward, but you need to understand now what it means for your company.
Yes.
Now, Linda, you're focused on the DACH region, but you also naturally have a very good understanding of the Finnish and the Nordic market. Do you see any differences on how the regulator, but also the companies are addressing these changes? Are there things that they can maybe learn from each other? The Finnish companies can learn from the German ones, or the Germans from the Finnish ones, or broader than that?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question. And that's obviously also something that we have been internally thinking about, also in terms of how we approach the companies. And to be very honest, it's not so much about the differences we see between the countries, because we get requests from everywhere, and we have people joining our webinars from Brazil, India, the United States. So it's more that what we can see is that companies, rather than looking at the country differences, look at industry differences. And our advice is usually always, there's always at least one company in your industry that is doing it already pretty good. They have a very honest and transparent report. It sounds very balanced. They've covered all the topics already, or they have done it on a voluntary basis for years to come. So just look at those reports and take the best parts from there, or ask them for advice, because that is also what we see in terms of regulators, in terms of different business associations. There's a lot that companies just want to help each other, because we all have to go through it, and we all have to do it, and we should also do it and regard it as very important. Because in the end, I mean, if our world is not livable for us anymore, there's also no business. I think I'm not the first one to say this. But in terms of technology and approach, I think there is definitely a difference. And I would say here, us Germans, we can learn a little bit from the Finns. And I think one of the biggest differences is that Finnish companies usually have a more pragmatic approach towards technology, because that is what I said in the beginning. There is no ready solution now, and there's also no solution that you implement now and it will be as good in 5 years. You have to constantly develop and change it. And I would say the Finnish client is usually more open to just say, okay, I like the basis that you have. Now let's develop it together. So with the German clients, it's a bit more that we want to have something ready. Otherwise, we just stick to the old approach. That has been, in a way, the biggest difference. So look at it also from a pragmatical point and just go with it and improve along the way. It does not need to be perfect now, but you need to start now. I think that's the biggest difference that I've been seeing.
Yeah, no, and that's something I can echo. I mean, I'm originally from Germany, been living in Finland for 20 years. I think that is something that goes across society. It's not only companies, it's the political system, it's the society as a whole, where you have a much more pragmatic, we need to get something done rather than we have to do it in a specific way, which I think helps a lot in approaching uncertainty in this context. Now, with the EcobioManager, you're looking to bring the regulatory requirements from different aspects into a single SaaS solution, digitizing, helping companies in that way, both with compliance, with reporting, with many other aspects. Now, from your experience, and you alluded to it a little bit, what are some of the best practices you have seen from companies in addressing the regulatory landscape, Katrine, that you outlined earlier, and in taking into use a more systematic, more structured approach that EcobioManager naturally offers? Are there some best practices you could share with our listeners?
Yeah. So what at least kind of what is important is, as we mentioned, also kind of involving the whole business, setting kind of the goals and define goals already from the business strategy, but also being able to revise those goals through time as also the landscape or the sustainability landscape and the regulatory landscape develops. And it's also very important that this strategy covers the whole organization. It's not enough that only the sustainability managers are working on the sustainability issues. It's important to involve everyone from the employees up through the management board and advisory boards as well. Then, of course, it's important to just get started. It's there, as Linda mentioned, there is no ready solution that will fit everybody, and there is no way to be fully prepared of everything you need to do before you start working on these sustainability issues. You just need to get started now, and by starting early, you also have the opportunity to learn from your mistakes through the process. And I think that is very, very important. So best practices includes kind of being aware of this and incorporating development and analyzing gaps throughout the process as well. And of course, especially now, kind of when companies need to set up new processes and document these processes, it's also important to identify what you already do and what you already do well and what you already have documented, or then document what you have, the process you already implement. And of course, using digital solutions makes it easier to keep track of all the documentation and the requirements and the required actions that you need to follow up on, and also to work continuously on improving these processes and compliance with the regulatory kind of requirements.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, you naturally have in the regulatory frameworks, be it the taxonomy, be it all the others, a lot of data requirements and requirements for data from across the company. And I was about to say even worse, across the value chain. So sometimes basically down the value chain where you don't have contractual ties anymore with companies that you require data from. How have you seen that process play out? How are you getting the data into the solution that you need in order to really comply with the regulation? Has that been easy in the projects you've been seeing, or is that something that companies need to work on?
Yeah, I think it actually really much depends on the company. So, because obviously we've had companies where you really feel that the data is just everywhere somewhere. And I mean, we cannot gather it for you just by ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you have companies that already approached it. They have a structured person. They have a few persons that really are dedicated to it. And that kind of goes in line with what Katrine just said before, that this data collection and this whole concept needs to be part of sustainability, and it needs to start from the very top. It is an integral strategical part of the company, because we've talked, or I've had meetings with incredibly smart and motivated managers, but they are the only ones in the company that are just trying to push all this wave through, and that's impossible for one person to handle. Even if you are a smaller company, it needs to start from the top, and everybody needs to understand why it has to be done, why it has to be documented.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what we're seeing very often is, as you said, that the sustainability manager is an island, and she or he basically has to take care of everything without a mandate, without a possibility to request input from other units, from other functions. And that has been a problem for years already in that context. So I fully agree with you. I think there has to be a mandate. There has to be a possibility to go across the organization, build awareness and build motivation by everyone to be involved. Now, the coffee is empty, but before we close, maybe one question. Where do you see the future development from a regulatory landscape point of view? Are there specific industries or areas you see will be in focus? And how do you feel companies can prepare for an accelerated global stream of regulations? As we talked, there's a lot in the making currently on EU level, but also if you look at the US, if you look at Asia and so on, there's a lot of very different approaches. And Katrine, the standardization that you mentioned earlier is, at least to my understanding, very, very far in the future, if we will ever reach it. So any points there? How do you see the future development?
That's a very good question. I think what we are seeing and what has been in a lot of the sustainability discussions already for several years is that if our aim is to ensure that we have a planet where we as people can continue to live and thrive, we need, or everyone, all businesses need to make an effort to get there. And a very important part of that is to incorporate small and medium-sized enterprises into this whole discussion. Of course, this has now started in EU with the incorporation of listed small, medium-sized companies. And I think that is a very important step. But I think it's also important to that this emphasis kind of grows, or kind of that it's more global than just European companies following these trends. And there is certain movements going on to ensure this. And also now, as so many companies need to collect data from their supply chain. So this will, I think this is something that will develop quite much. And I think also there will be attempts at least to make sure that, for example, these sustainability reporting frameworks, that they at least speak the same language or part of the same language, so that it's companies don't need to do double reporting, to put it that way. It's enough to make one report work for whatever reporting initiative you need to follow. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, the struggle will be how to get there.
Yeah, I think the good thing is there's a lot of activity at the moment. There's a lot happening at the moment. When I started to look into these topics, I don't know, 10 plus years ago, as Linda, you also pointed out, I mean, in 2019, you were the odd one out when you talked about sustainability, circularity, all of these topics. Nowadays, it's mainstream. It has arrived on the sea level, which is very encouraging in that regard. Now, as mentioned, the coffee is empty and it's time to wrap up this episode of the Circular Coffee Break. Thanks a lot, Linda and Katrine, for joining me today and for shedding a little bit of light on the regulatory topic. I think it's so complex, it's so multifaceted. We could easily spend another hour without running out of topics. So thanks a lot for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Cool. For all you listening out there, we hope today's episode was interesting and inspiring, and you got a little bit better understanding of what's happening from a legislative point of view. If you like the podcast, you can actually help us out grow the Circular Coffee Break community by giving us a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcasting platform you're using. Also, please remember to subscribe to stay in the loop on new episodes. We have a lot of fantastic guests lined up and a lot of very interesting discussions like the one today already on the agenda for the coming episodes. So make sure you stay in the loop. With that, I'm looking forward to seeing all of you here on the Circular Coffee Break.